Hey, Alex Chen, software architect. I build and maintain software for a living, and lately I keep circling back to one problem. So, this is me thinking out loud about it. So, here's the thing. Picture opening your GitHub notifications on a Tuesday. 47 new pull requests. You start scrolling. Same feature request, 5 different implementations. 2 of them are resubmissions of a PR you already closed 6 months ago. One has no tests. One just renames a variable to something that, quote, sounds cleaner. And that's not a bad week. That's a Tuesday. I want to talk about what's actually happening to open source maintainership right now. Why AI-generated contributions are accelerating a problem that was already there. This isn't me saying AI is bad. Honestly, I use these tools every day. It's about who ends up paying for quality. Let me start with something we can actually measure. Because for a while, this was all vibes and anecdotes. It isn't anymore. GitHub published their own numbers this year. AI agents went from around 4 million pull requests a month in September 2025 to roughly 17 million a month by March 2026. That's not a typo. 4 to 17 in about half a year on GitHub's own platform by their own count. And here's the tell for how they feel about it. In June 2026, GitHub shipped a feature that lets maintainers cap how many open pull requests a single non-collaborator can have at once. Think about that for a second. That's a rate limiter. For human contribution, GitHub built a throttle for people opening PRs. Because the volume broke the assumption the whole workflow was built on. But what matters isn't just the volume, it's the distribution shift underneath it. More contributions doesn't mean proportionally more useful ones. What maintainers keep describing, in threads, in blog posts, at conferences, is that the ratio changed. More low-context PRs, more duplicate attempts at the same change, more PRs that fix a problem the project doesn't even have. Some of the analysis floating around puts it at something like 1 in 10 AI-generated PRs actually clearing the bar to be worth a review. I'd take the exact number with a grain of salt, but the direction? That tracks with everything I've seen. And the common thread is a pattern you start to recognize. Syntactically confident, structurally reasonable, missing all the project context. It looks like it belongs. It doesn't. Here's why that's the hard part. The tools that lowered the barrier to contribution did not lower the barrier to review. Those are two completely separate costs. One is the cost to produce a change. The other is the cost to evaluate it. And they've decoupled, which, the ecosystem was not ready for. Quick pause for a word from this video's sponsor, which, full disclosure, is our own platform. And I'm handing the read to my colleague Lucas, because he pitches it better than I do.
Thanks, Alex. Here's the thing, and it's simple. Most makers are solving two problems at the same time. What to build next, and how to keep the lights on while they build it. Feels like two problems. It's not. Swoin.io connects them. Your community subscribes monthly, so you get predictable recurring revenue. And every subscription comes with innovation tokens they spend on the features they actually want. So the roadmap follows where the real energy is instead of where you're guessing. At the end of the day, you stop choosing between paying the bills and building the right thing. Links in the description. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks, Lucas. Okay, let me talk about what this actually does to the people on the receiving end, because I think burnout is the wrong mental image. People hear burnout and picture one dramatic breaking point. That's not it. It's cumulative. It's the 300th time you explain why a PR that changes a public API without touching the docs can't be merged. It's writing the same polite rejection, carefully worded, kind, for something that costs the other person about 3 minutes of prompting. And saying no is work. Even a thoughtful thanks, but this doesn't fit the direction, costs time and attention. Multiply that across a queue that just went 4x, and you start to understand why maintainers go quiet. And when they go quiet, they usually don't announce it. They just stop merging, stop responding. The queue accumulates. The project starts feeling abandoned while technically still being alive. There's a name for that now: zombie projects. Listed as active, functionally unmaintained. Want a concrete one? Jazzband. It was a Python collective. Ran for over 10 years on a beautifully simple idea: shared push access. Everyone who joined could triage, merge, push. 84 projects maintained that way. And in March 2026, they announced their sunsetting. The reason they gave is basically this exact problem. Their model assumed the worst case was somebody accidentally merging the wrong PR. It was never built for a world where you can't trust the volume anymore. 10 years, gone because the trust model didn't survive the flood. So here's the thing about the deeper cause. AI didn't just change the volume, it changed the economics. Submitting a PR used to cost something real. You had to understand the code base, write the code yourself, test it. That friction wasn't a bug, it was a filter. It sorted for people who'd invested enough to know what they were contributing to. Language models dissolved that friction. And, this is the part that matters, they dissolved it asymmetrically. Creating a contribution is now near zero cost. Describe the change, generate the diff, open the PR. Minutes. Reviewing that contribution costs exactly what it always did. Human time, human judgment, human communication. None of that got cheaper. That gap, cheap to create, expensive to review, that's the whole structural problem in one line. And to be fair, it's not about bad intent. Most people using these tools aren't trying to cause you pain. They're using what's in front of them. The tool just doesn't tell them the contribution might not be wanted, or that reviewing it lands on someone else's plate. And I want to be balanced here, because lowering barriers to contribution is genuinely good. More accessibility for new contributors is good. I'm not arguing for more gatekeeping. I'm saying the asymmetry has a real cost. And right now that cost lands entirely on maintainers. They didn't sign up to absorb it, there's just nobody else standing there. So what happens when maintainers burn out? The outcomes kind of cluster into three. The project gets abandoned, issues go stale, security holes go unpatched, and downstream, everyone depending on it absorbs that risk silently. They find out when something breaks in production. Or, second path, it forks. Someone frustrated enough spins up an alternative, but now the community's split. 2 versions, 2 roadmaps, half the attention on each. Both weaker than the original would have been with stable maintenance. Or third, the maintainer just narrows scope. No new features, maintenance only. Which is completely rational under an overwhelming queue, but it means the project stops moving. The stuff people actually need doesn't get built. They wait or they leave. None of that is inevitable, but it gets a lot more likely when the cost to contribute drops and the capacity to review stays flat. That's the math. And right now, the math isn't favorable. This isn't abstract either. Open source infrastructure is load-bearing. The packages your production stack depends on. A lot of them are maintained by 1 or 2 people on their own time with no stable funding. That's not a hypothetical. That's just the current state of the thing everything else is built on. To be fair, this isn't new. Maintainership has always been under-resourced. AI didn't create the problem. It's accelerating a dynamic that was already under strain. What it did was make the problem impossible to keep ignoring. So, what actually helps? There's the tactical layer, and it's worth acknowledging. Stricter contribution guidelines. Bots that filter duplicates and flag the obvious stuff. GitHub's new PR caps. Reduce scope, co-maintainers, better templates. These help at the margins. I use some of them, but none of them touch the actual root cause. And here's what matters. Maintaining quality software has a real, ongoing cost, and there's no reliable mechanism to fund it at scale. GitHub sponsors exists. Open Collective exists. They're useful. I'm not knocking them. But they frame the whole thing as donation. Optional, irregular, no reciprocity built in. That's just not a structure that scales to the maintenance burden of infrastructure-grade software. What would actually move the needle is sustainable income for maintainers, not donations. Not a grant with an 18-month horizon. Not side contract work that competes with the maintenance itself. Recurring, predictable support that tracks the actual cost of keeping software healthy. Because, the moment you give a maintainer stability, the dynamics change. They can respond faster. Set clearer expectations. Bring on co-maintainers. Actually afford to review thoughtfully instead of burning goodwill just to keep pace. And I'll be transparent. I'm not a neutral party here. This is the problem I'm building Swoin for. Subscription-based community funding specifically for software. A model where the people using the software actively support the people maintaining it. Not as charity, as participation, with reciprocity built in. Structured input, roadmap visibility, a relationship that goes both ways. But honestly, the mechanism isn't the point. The principle is, make it economically viable to maintain quality software over a longer horizon than a grant cycle allows, whether that's Swoin or something else. So, 3 things I'd carry out of this. 1. The PR volume problem is a symptom. The cause is the economic model of open source maintenance. The symptom is accelerating because of AI. The cause was already there. 2. The asymmetry between creation cost and review cost is real, it's growing, and it won't self-correct. Somebody has to absorb the cost of review. Right now, that somebody is unpaid maintainers. 3. If you depend on open source, and if you build software, you do, it's worth thinking about how you contribute to the funding ecosystem, not just the code. If you're building software and you're curious what subscription-based community funding actually looks like in practice, the short link's in the description. And if you're a maintainer with a take on this, or honestly, if you're on the other side, using AI tools to contribute and you see it differently, I'd genuinely like to hear it. Drop it in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if you're new here, this is the kind of thing I dig into regularly. The economics and trade-offs underneath the tools we all use. If that's your wavelength, subscribe and stick around. Next, I'd watch the one on why just do a Kickstarter is usually the wrong call for software. Because that funding gap I kept pointing at, that video is where it gets concrete. Coming soon. See you there.